Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach COLIN here. If you don't know, I'm standing up from now on. It feels better. I like the energy. I like it. And I found the original hat. For all you OG watchers out there, you know about this hat. It wasn't always the Texas hat. Now, let's get right into it. Joe Rogan, Matt Walsh, they're sitting down. They're talking about Matt Walsh's new movie. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It's called Am I Racist? Where Matt Walsh literally makes clowns of all of these people who are these DEI, anti-racism, race hustlers out there. And one in particular, Robin DiAngelo, is someone that Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh touch on. I'm going to be showing you a little bit about her, who she is, the statement she released since the movie came out. She's very unhappy, to say the least. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of Robin so you understand exactly why Matt chose her as someone to cover in the movie, someone to trick in the movie, quite honestly. Let's get right into the Joe Rogan.
It's one of the best comedies I've seen in a long time because there's so many moments in it that are so uncomfortable.
That means a lot. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for.
The Robin DiAngelo one, where you gave that guy money for reparations and you got her. She thought it was uncomfortable.
Yeah, that was kind of when we had the idea for the film to talk about race. We knew we needed to get Robin DiAngelo. I didn't think we'd get her because I figured she'd be a lot more
savvy.
Cautious. Yeah, savvy and cautious. But apparently she has no idea what's happening outside of her bubble at all. So she didn't know who I was. I mean, I gave her my name, and she had no clue. So,
wow.
But we kind of went into that knowing what the end was supposed to be. If we could get her, we came up with that idea. We went to a bar the night before the interview, and we came up with this idea. Could we get her to actually pay reparations to Ben, our black producer? And we had to kind of talk him into it. And, it was really just like, in real time, I was there for about 2 hours. And it was an hour and a half of the most mind-numbing conversation where none of that's in the movie because it's just me, like, fluff questions. And I'm repeating back to her own ideas so she knows that I'm a safe person.
Right.
It's a safe space. And then you got to build to it and build to it and build to it. And then finally you get to a point where you can do something a little weird. And she'll probably go along with it. And she did. I mean, you saw we go through we have a whole series of exercises we want to do with her, and she did it. She was game. So that was one of the first things we filmed. So after we got that, we knew that, okay, we have a movie here.
I feel like you got your money's worth with her, seeing as it's $15,000, but I feel like you got robbed by the lady that got upset about the mascot. 50 grand. You barely got anything out of her.
Yeah, that was part of the point of the movie is that's why we put the price tags on the screen. We want people to see how absurd it is. So in a certain way, it was like the higher they quoted the price, we said, great, we'll pay that because we want this in the movie,
right?
Because if all these people had said, oh yeah, I'll do it for free or I'll do it for $200, just pay my travel, doesn't really make the point,
right?
But they all were quoting exorbitant prices, and she was the most
$50,000,
and then she basically said almost nothing. But it was okay.
No one ever found out who the identity of the mascot is.
No, I don't think so.
It would have been hilarious if it was a person of color.
Well, it almost certainly was. It almost certainly was because if it was a white guy,
they would have thrown him under the bus.
Yeah, they would have. So the fact that they didn't, it's probably some like Hispanic kid or something.
And you got to imagine you can't see real good with that fucking costume. You ever put a mascot costume on?
I haven't, but I can tell that there's little eye slits. You can't even see what's below you.
Exactly.
And that's why,
Duncan and I did a whole podcast where we pretended to be furries. We lasted, every podcast we do, we dress up. We'll dress up like Star Wars people or whatever, spaceship people. We did a podcast as furries. We kept the helmets on for maybe 5 minutes. We're like, I can't fucking do it. And we both took them off. We're like, props to the furries. If you could run around with this thing on, this is hard to do. Like, you can't see shit. You can't breathe. So the idea that he missed those kids is
the furries are doing a lot more than running around in those things too. So
they are. I think they designed special ones for that.
Yeah, I don't even want to know, but
like a hatch.
But it's actually a perfect example of what these people do. These race hustlers, that something happened. It was a little bit unpleasant.
Yes,
not a big deal. There's a million ways to interpret that. It's just a normal human thing that happens in the world. Like, things happen that are a little bit unpleasant. You're disappointed. Your kid didn't get a high five. Okay, it happens. But for them, they have one lens for seeing the world, and the lens is through this left-wing racial ideology. So everything that happens is colored by that.
Right.
And everything is understood through that lens. So anything, I mean, you think about Michelle Obama when she was First Lady. She had multiple stories that she would tell about as First Lady being discriminated against because of her race, allegedly. And one of them was she was in line for ice cream or something, and someone cut in front of her. And she told this story in some interview, this very dramatic story about, well, they didn't see her because she's black. And meanwhile, it's like we've all been cut. Lady, people have cut in front of all of us. It's just that if it happens to me at Walmart, I don't think of it racially. I just think, oh, this person's an asshole.
Exactly.
But for her, it's all racial. So
that's a crazy one to say that someone cutting in front of you, a selfish act, is somehow racist. Just because that's like looking for racism everywhere.
Right.
That kind of situation is so normal. It's so normal that some cuts in front of you.
Right, exactly. It's an unpleasant thing that happens to all people, and if you're not in the kind of race hustler bubble, you don't see it that way. But
it's interesting that nobody wants to call that out. Nobody wants to be reasonable. Nobody wants to say, well, is that like, you just say, oh wow, you have to listen to it. That's part of the problem. Like, you can't say, are you sure that's racist? Because then you're a racist apologist, and then you're racist by proxy.
Yeah, and how do you know? So how do you know what's in that other person's mind? How can you ascribe motives to them?
Right.
It drives me nuts that this is what we do now, where if someone does something or says something, someone else is offended by it, that person who's offended gets to decide what the intent was behind the other person's action, to the extent that if the other person says, no, this was my intention, I'll tell you what it was, they don't get to have a say in the intentions behind their own actions. They are suddenly not authorities in their own behavior.
Exactly.
This other person who was the offended party gets to inform you what you meant by that thing. Which is really what the movie's called Am I Racist? But in reality, there's only one person who can answer whether you're a racist person, and that's you. And if you don't think that you're racist, then you aren't, because racism is a thought process. And if it's not in your head, then you're not racist. You might have stereotypical views about people of other races. Everybody does to some extent. You might think things that are even insulting about people of other races, but it's not racist, because racist means you hate people of other races or you think they're inferior to you.
Right.
But you could be not a racist person and think that whatever, Asians are bad drivers. You could think that stereotype is true. Whether it's true or not, you just happen to think that that's a true thing about this group. Doesn't mean you hate them. Doesn't mean that you think that they're inferior. It's just,
you can say frat boys are annoying and not hate men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whether and most of the time, these stereotypes, they didn't just fall out of the sky. Like they're grounded in something.
If they did, it wouldn't make any sense.
Right. And nobody would be offended. That's the thing. Nobody would be offended by a stereotype that had that really was not true at all.
Right.
You're only offended because it rings true at least a little bit, because otherwise it would just be absurd. Which is why when you get, in the movie we go, there's a section where we go kind of outside this bubble, and we go down, we talk to bikers at a biker bar in the South. We talk to the poor black community in New Orleans. And the only reason we did that was just, let's find people who are not, they probably didn't go to college, so they didn't get brainwashed there. They're not getting the corporate DEI seminars. They're not reading Robin DiAngelo or any of these people. What do they think about this stuff? Are they worried about systemic racism? Do they see everything as racist all the time? And what we found is no, they're just not even, they don't even speak that language. When you say the term systemic racism to them, they say, well, what do you mean by that? What is that?
Well, this was something that, like people are always concerned about people being racist, but there's something that happened in this country somewhere around 2012-ish where things really, really ramped up. And it just became much more of a subject that was like constantly around, worrying about racial bias, and it ramped up, right? It ramped up to you get to the point where you do have some of these race hustlers that are saying everyone's racist. You must confront your unconscious bias, and and you're just constantly hearing about it. It's like,
I think you're right that it was around 2012. BLM came into formation in 2013. I think that was the Trayvon Martin thing, and it's not a coincidence that it seemed like race relations in this country were improving decade after decade. They weren't perfect, but it seemed like they were pretty good.
Much better than the 60s.
Yeah, the 90s. I grew up in the 90s. It was not perfect, but I grew up in a diverse area. I went to public school. A lot of people of different ethnicities and races. We weren't talking about racism all the time. It was basically fine. And then something happened in the middle part of the first decade of the 2000s where it seemed like things started backsliding, and that's right at the time when Barack Obama was elected. And that's not a coincidence. Like, a lot of people have noticed that it's odd that we had a black president, and then all of a sudden, now we're having race riots again. And I think the reason is that when you elect a black president, I didn't like Obama. I didn't vote for him. I think his policies are terrible. But you would think that at least one positive you could draw from that is that, well, at least that means that systemic racism is not a problem in this country anymore. I mean, if a black guy could rise to the top of the system and run it, then clearly the system is not racist against black people. And in fact, was overwhelmingly voted into that position by Americans, which is true. So that is evidence that America isn't systemically racist against black people. But the race hustlers don't want us to draw that conclusion. They're worried that we'll look at Obama as president and say, okay, well, racism isn't a big issue anymore. And that's a problem for them because there's a lot of power, money, and influence to be found in the racism narrative. So they had to kind of like double up on their efforts to convince us that America is actually racist, which is why during Obama's term, that's when we started getting all these race hoaxes and the race riots and BLM. That's when things like people started talking about microaggressions and all this kind of nonsense.
Man, couldn't be more true. A lot of people actually call Obama the Great Divider because they noticed. A lot of people have noticed this, that when he came into the political scene as a presidential candidate, all of a sudden, it was the first time where all of a sudden, if you didn't want to vote for somebody, it was like, oh, you must be racist. That's all that is. You're a white supremacist. You don't want him in office. Oh, because you're a white supremacist. Like, that's, that was the first time that started happening. And it was the starting of the snowball. Like, that was the snowball getting pushed up the hill. And then as he got elected, the snowball went down the hill. Always, it's slower going up. So as he was coming into power and everything, you saw it ramping up little by little. Once it got to that peak, as he was about to get elected for a second term, it rolled down. And we've just never been able to recover at all in regards to race relations. The normal people have. And a lot of those people have gathered up behind MAGA, and some of them are just in the middle. But normal people have gotten it together. But there's still this weird section of people where it's like, you can bump into them and it's because you're racist. And it's very interesting. I actually had a bit about that when I was a comedian. Well, when I was going on stage really hard. That's part of the reason why I'm standing up, because I can't wait to get back on stage. But I had this bit where there was an advanced green and all these white people got to take the turn. But then when I came up to it, it turned yellow and then red. And there was an instance where I was like, racist. All these white people get the turn. This machine in front of me, this automated machine that just works, is racist. There was a quick second of that in my head, and I started laughing my head off, and I was like, I gotta write that down, because it's true, man. A lot of people they take it way, way, way too far. One thing that he said in that whole thing, Matt Walsh, one thing that he said that I never think of, because black people actually pulled the greatest scam in the world. We can't be racist. So I never have to think about this as a black person. Whoever the black person was that first said that black people can't be racist. Good job, man. Good job. Thank you. But you don't even have a say in what you don't have a say in what your intentions were when something happens. Only the person who is offended has a say in what you meant by what you did or what you said. I never thought of that. That's so true. And it must drive, and I can't even say it must. I'm seeing it drive white people crazy. White people are going nuts because of it. They're like, I didn't say anything. I didn't mean you people. I meant people. They got to explain over and over again. It's really funny. But going back to the actual movie, yes, Matt Walsh actually did have this woman pay his black producer, Ben, reparations. She, again, like Matt said, took her Twitter down. Riley Gaines actually covered this. She said, Robin DiAngelo, author of White Fragility, we'll get into that book in a second, and professional race baiter, deactivated her Twitter after being duped by paying reparations to black producer. It's absolutely amazing. This is her. And if you haven't seen the movie or anything, this is how Matt dressed up. Now, it's not much of a change from how Matt actually is. It's just he has a wig on, same beard, he has a little bit of a soy smile going on here. But that was enough to fool her. And the reason that he didn't think he was going to get to actually speak to her, Matt has been making videos about Robin for at least 4 years. Not every month, but enough that if she just did one search, if she just went Matt and her own name, his videos and his face would have popped up all over YouTube. So, she really is in a little bit of a bubble. This is her book, if you don't know, White Fragility. It's about why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Yeah, I can think of one reason. It's because everybody keeps telling them that they're all racist, even if they're not. I would not be interested in having a conversation about race if the focal point was I'm racist, especially when I'm not. I'd be like, no, we're not doing that. That would be like, Colin, why don't you want to talk about you being a crack addict? I'd be like, well, the thing about it is, guys, I'm not a crack addict. I don't do it. I don't do crack. And they're like, listen, I know it's hard for you to comprehend that you're a crack addict, but I'd be like, guys, I'm not having this conversation. I don't smoke crack. And they'd be like, you have to admit it. Can you imagine how crazy that would make somebody? Meanwhile, there's actual crack addicts like scratching in the background. Like, go talk to them. Don't make this about other people, Colin. She released a statement. I found this mind-blowing. They touched on it in the clip a little bit, and she was very upfront about it. I can't believe it. She said, back in 2023, I was contracted by a group that claimed to be making a documentary called Shades of Justice about the efforts to address racism in the United States. They plan to interview anti-racist activists, so made up, that's not a real thing, authors and thought leaders in service of supporting the cause of racial inequity. They offered me between $10,000 to $20,000 for the interview. I said, let's meet in the middle with $15,000. How nice of her. She could have just said, you know what, let's do 10. Since I'm an anti-racist activist and it's not a real thing, and you're willing to give me $10,000 to talk to you for 2 hours, let's just do 10,000. It's cool. She's like, nah, let's do 15. I'll let you off 5. Absolutely incredible. She said, let's meet in the middle, blah, blah, blah. She has since donated that to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. That's so funny. And she did it just because the movie came out. Like, if it was just she got tricked, she'd be like, nah, I'm going to keep my money. I keep this white supremacist money, It's better if a good white person like me has it than those white supremacists at Daily Wire. Now, what she ended up saying was, I realized after reviewing the sequence of events, discussing it with colleagues, I realized that they had lied about their agenda and I had been played. I spread the word on my networks. Unfortunately, last month, I started receiving hateful and misogynistic emails. Some referenced the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's website, which announced that the film is indeed being released. Absolutely amazing. Another part of her statement, this is actually from her website. This is straight from her website. Her website is actually Robin DeAngelo, PhD, if you're wondering. And this is what she said after, because she's pissed now. Pissed. She said, Matt Walsh is a blogger and talk show host for the Daily Wire website. He frequently demonizes LGBTQ people. Oh, plus. My apologies, people. Plus on there. People, and promotes racist and anti-transgender conspiracy theories. Walsh leads a campaign against gender-affirming healthcare that has targeted American hospitals with harassment and has advocated for executing doctors who provide healthcare to transgender people. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not true. You know what? I'm going to give Matt Walsh the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say that that's not true. If it is true, I would say Matt's a wild boy, and I missed that episode. Anyway, Matt Walsh is also known for perpetuating the notion of anti-white racism, which is grounded in white supremacy. Isn't that something? Isn't that something for white people, that if you sit back and say, you know what, people are being racist towards me because I'm white, she, a white person herself, would turn around and say what you're saying is grounded in white supremacy. Isn't that something? I'm telling you, it must be rough being white right now. It must be. Being a white guy right now is just, oh, jeez, that must be rough. Someone could be openly racist to you. You could look at them and say, that's racist. And they'll point back at you and say, that's rooted in white supremacy. What? I'd move to the woods. I'd move to the forest, deep in the forest. White supremacy and spreading conspiracy theories about supposed campaigns of anti-white violence. Absolutely amazing. So she released this statement because she knew she got tricked and she really wanted to slam Matt Walsh in the Daily Wire and give away her $10,000. Let me tell you something. We got to go back to this one thing. She's getting paid. She thought it was normal. That means she actually does get paid around this much money. Even, let's just say, $2,000 to $20,000. Someone pays her thousands of dollars to sit down and talk? That's crazy. Crazy. And only when it's Matt Walsh and she gets duped into paying reparations to a black producer as a joke, only then does she donate it to the NAACP. Only then. No other time. Any other time, it's all on the up and up. That money's all hers. She's like, give me my money. Any other time. Wow. Absolutely amazing. This is Robin. I just wanted you to hear this so you understand a little bit of why Matt thought this would be the lady to really get on his platform, on his movie, I should say.
Students. And I had written the article, White Fragility, about the frustration of trying to talk to white people about racism. So being a diversity trainer, going day in and day out, going against my socialization, which, most white people are taught not to talk about racism. And every day I walked into rooms filled with white people and say, we're going to talk about racism. Most often standing side by side with a black co-facilitator who was the only person of color in most of those rooms, and just being stunned at the hostility to the conversation, at the meanness. I mean, we can be really mean on this topic, and driving home with that co-facilitator and bearing witness is part of being white, is never having to bear witness to the pain of racism on.
This is amazing. She's like, I couldn't believe the meanness. And you know the meanness. The meanness is a bunch of white people being like, I'm not racist. You just called me racist. I'm not a racist person. I don't understand what this is. None of us are racist here. Well, why do we have to deal with this? And this lady drags a black person in with her and says, get in here. Get in here. Look at this face. This is the only black person here. I brought them. This is my black person. I brought him. What? Hey, Robin, what's going on here? What's happening here, Robin? Absolutely amazing. This is another little tidbit of why she would be the person to bring on to Matt's movie. This is a little segment of hers. I don't see color. How much that pisses her off.
I'll never forget a moment of standing beside a black man leading a workshop on race, and a white woman said to him, I don't see color. He said, well, then how are you going to see racism? Because I am black. I do think you know that, and I have a different experience than you do. And you're not going to be able to understand that, and you're not going to be able to support the parts of that experience that are really painful and problematic if you refuse to acknowledge my reality. I don't see color is really a way of saying I refuse to acknowledge your reality.
Amazing. You know, it's funny. I was actually watching a show recently, and not even just watching a show, the leftist mindset in general. And I am going to blanket statement. I don't do that often, but I will right now. They have this idea. We used to go with the one thing, MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., although he was surrounded by communists, and that's for a different video, but he had that one thing that he said, looking at somebody's the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, and everybody was like, yes, that's the ideal. That's the ideal world. And at some point, and I think it has a little bit to do with what Joe's talking about, what Matt was talking about in regards to Obama coming into power, and a little bit before then, it was beneficial for people to move away from that mindset, because that mindset brings about unity. And that's a little bit about why MLK got shot in the first place, right? Now we're in this mind state where race has to be focused on so much and gender has to be focused on with a microscope. It's so crazy. And all it does is divide and get women like her paid $10,000 per appearance. It's crazy. I'm jealous. I'm not going to lie. I'm jealous. It's insane. She gets to talk about basically nothing and get paid 10. Can you imagine? She does that 10 times a year. She gets $100,000 for talking about nothing. For her stoking the flames of racism herself and making white people believe that they're racist when they're not, and making black people feel like they're oppressed when they're not, that they're lower than when they're not, she gets paid six figures. Could you imagine? And it's probably way more. Here's another little tidbit.
Hierarchy. The challenge I want to offer my fellow white people is changing the question from if to how.
Whoa. Did she say fellow white people? Hold on a second. You gathering up white people? Robin, you can't be gathering up white people, okay? I don't have to be a diversity trainer like you to know. You can't be gathering up white people. Not cool. You know, a group of black people, those are gangs and thugs. A group of white people, that's a J6. You gathering up a J6? Huh? You going after democracy? I wrote that one down. I'm taking that one on the stage, baby. A group of white people is called the J6. Oh, gosh. I'm kidding. They're jokes, guys. Come on. That's the thing about race, man. You're supposed to be able to laugh at it. That's the real thing with race. You're not supposed to look at it like you're scolding everybody about race. You're supposed to be able to laugh about it. You're supposed to be able to talk about stereotypes and talk about how funny they are. And, you know, but there's this group of people, and it's not just that they benefit financially. There's a group of people in these groups, in the black community, in the Jewish community, in the Asian community, who want it. They want the victim mentality. They want the points that they can gather up. They want the virtue signaling. They want it a little bit easier. They want to be able to point at you and be like, what did you just say to me? What did you mean by that? They want to be able to do that. And it's becoming a whole generation of people, and it's gross. And it's taking us so far away from unity. And I think, because I have my tinfoil Speedo on, I think at the end of the day, that's actually what they want. They want us separated in that way. I really do think that. Anyways, guys, go check out the movie I Am Racist. Joe Rogan was raving about it. He watched it in the sauna. He watched it outside the sauna. He thought it was hilarious. He called it one of the best comedies he has seen in a long time. And that's saying a lot, because it's Matt Walsh and he's not a comedian, but he definitely has a comedic flair. 100%. Go and check that movie out. I know I am. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. I'm out.